So I am an artist, obviously, and I work in fabric, and mostly in fabric and soft sculpture. And if you ever talk to anybody who does like sewing or quilting or knitting, they all tell you like, oh, I learned this from my grandmother, I learned this from my aunt or my mom. Mostly like an older person in their family, that's usually a woman. So this is my granny, and she taught me how, like, everything that I know about quilting and sewing. She lived on Kingdom Come Creek in Letcher County, Kentucky. And this is the first quilt that we made together. It won first prize in the Letcher County Homemakers Club, which is like my prize. I have that blue ribbon framed, which is pretty much just like a bunch of old ladies getting together and quilting and gossiping. But okay, so I wasn't always working with fabric. I made a lot of bad video art in undergrad, and then I got into documentary film in graduate school. And I moved to New York after getting my MFA, and I started working in film and television, where you have to stare at a screen a lot. And I started to really crave like using my hands and making something tangible, and also that was just like, I could finish it really fast. So I picked up a quilt that my grandmother had started but not finished, and this was in late 2014 when the media was kind of revving up for an election cycle, so kind of exactly where we are right now, right? We're about to like get started on the 2020 election. And when that happens, like all the issues that are going to be hot button topics in the election start to pop up. And also there was in the news, there was also like numerous acts of gun violence, and still are, I guess. But it was like, I was like listening to a lot of that coverage. Because remember, it used to be displayed, like the way that they would cover the gun violence stuff was like very different than it is now. Or maybe there's just too many that happen now, so there's like don't have time to go into all. Anyway, I was like really consuming that in probably a negative way. And I went home to Kentucky where a friend of mine had this wall of handguns. And I was like, ooh, that feels really strange. Like, I've been in New York for a couple years. You don't see that in any New York apartments. And so I was like, had picked up this quilting again, so I was like, I wonder what like a wall of quilted handguns would look like. So I made some. And like kept making them. And it seemed like there was a lot of shootings that were happening. And you know, the news was on that cycle of like, who's to blame? Should we change the laws? Should we ban guns? Should we like send hashtag thoughts and prayers? And nothing would happen, and we'd move on, and you know, the cycle would continue. And while this was happening, I was in that like, I'm sure there's a lot of artists here who are, you get in that zone of you make something and you make like a shit ton of them, you know, and you're like, whoa! All of a sudden I'm like I was like living in this basement apartment in Bushwick with 4 dudes, and all of a sudden I didn't have a studio, I had just like guns on my bed, guns in the living room, guns on the couch. I was like, oh god, what did I do? So I was making them like somewhat obsessively, and also trying to process at the same time, or along with the rest of the country, like why is this happening? And what motivates these men? Like, I say men because they were mostly at the hands of men, these like shootings that were happening. And someone at Vice, they were like, oh, I want to write about your work. And I was like, you should write about the relationship to gun ownership and violence, and with this like rise of this angry men with guns. And then I came across this article. I was like, oh, somebody wrote it. America's gun problem has everything to do with America's masculinity problem. And, you know, when you're making art stuff, when you're like, you get to explore these topics that are, you don't really have to back them up with facts. You can be like, I feel like something's weird here. I'm going to explore it. And this was kind of cool to find because this sociologist was kind of like putting that into like a more academic setting. So as men doubt their ability to provide, their desire to protect becomes all the more important. They see carrying a gun as a masculine duty. And I actually reached out to this woman, she's in Arizona, and then they like flew me out there and we did this conference together. It was really cool. But like, so yeah, like looking at this issue of masculinity and gun culture. So I started making them like really droopy and more like exaggerated, maybe kind of impotent. I got my roommate to do some modeling. And so with this Warm Gun series, I'm using this kind of playful approach of soft sculpture and turning this familiar to some, scary to others, recognizable object of a gun in hopes of kind of opening this discussion that's to some people pretty difficult to have. So this is a show in my hometown of Lexington, Kentucky. And so I was at this gallery one day. This is a good little example of this. So I was at this gallery, and these two older women walked in, and they didn't know I was the artist, but I was just kind of there. And they were like, "Oh, these are so cute! Like, look at these! They're just like, I love this fabric, or I love this like color." And they're kind of laughing. And then they got quiet for a second, and one woman was like, "Well, you know, I live on a farm, and I have a shotgun, and I think I feel like protected by having it, and I don't want anybody to take that away." Another woman was like, "Yeah, but like these assault rifles, like we don't really need those. It's getting ridiculous." And I was like, "Oh wow, like maybe they would have had that conversation without me, but maybe not." So I was like, it's kind of like the Mary Poppins approach, like a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Like, here's a little soft-coded thing to talk about something that is kind of difficult to talk about otherwise. This is also in Kentucky. It's at this gallery called Apple Shop, which actually, it's in the town where my grandmother's from. So in the upstairs, there's this quilt that my grandmother helped quilt. So that was kind of cool to be like showing in the same place as her. Some more guns. Some more guns. So, to some people, gun ownership is tied really closely to their identity. And when you threaten someone's beliefs and identity, it really pisses people off. So in December of 2016, this friend sent me a link to an article about my work that I wasn't really aware existed. It was called "Feminist Artist Takes on Toxic Masculinity by Making Soft, Impotent Sculptures with Guns." So this is Glenn Beck's website, The Blaze. And so there was this Huffington Post article that was written about my work, and they really don't like Huffington Post over at The Blaze. So they were kind of picking apart the article, and they're not a fan. It was not a very positive article about my work. They're not a fan. But so then everyone's always like, "Oh, don't read the comments. You're not supposed to read the comments." But I did. And there are some gems. So just more proof that liberalism is a mental disease. And this was like a nice suggestion. Maybe she could bake some gun-shaped pies or cakes. I might be okay with that. Soft and impotent is how Ms. Baxter likes her men. LOL.
My father too.
Somehow, yeah. Somehow I don't think she dates men. This one's pretty tense. I'm sorry, feminists, that you were sexually abused as a child and physically abused as an adult. You must be sad living out the remainder of your life, bitter, angry, and resentful. Soft-headed sculptures from a soft-headed snowflake. Bless your soft little heart. So then I turned them into these like wall hangings and banners. So like, this chick needs a good railing. So I turned that into like a wall hanging. That's artsy folks with shrooms and LSD to the head. And this one kind of sums up the whole series for me. Clearly, Natalie Baxter is confused about her role as a woman. So, like, I actually kind of am a little confused. Like, what is my role as a woman? Like, am I supposed to sit home and quilt? Because I kind of do that. So, a lot of these, they're geared at my gender, my sexuality, my mental state. So it's kind of this same weird aggression that I was exploring with the guns. And what I'm doing is kind of turning them into these banners that kind of look like suffragette banners. So women 100 years ago fighting for gender equality. Here we are, this weird internet age, doing the same thing. Democrats just want to be sluts. That's like one of my favorites. Just a man-hating feminazi with no redeemable qualities, not to mention no brain. One on the left says, "This libtard's out of her freaking mind. Progs are so silly." Yeah, so that series I call alt caps. Oh, this is a nice, fun one. Nothing more than psychobabble bullshit. So then this next series I call Bloated Flags. So I started making these around the summer of 2016. It was when the Republican National Convention, the Democratic National Convention were taking place. And maybe you remember, it was like there's a lot of people like, the Democrats don't have enough flag waving, like we need more flags. So I was like, what's up? I wanted to do something with flags. And I started thinking about them after the Charleston shooting and how it kind of sparked this debate about the Confederate flag. And I think actually a friend of mine in Tennessee, I remember during that, she just texted me, was like, I saw 9 Confederate flags this morning. How many did you see? I was like, oh wow, none. But so it's like that Confederate flag being this symbol that took on something completely different and like kind of morphed over time. I started thinking about that in terms of the American flag and what was. Like, remember that time, that summer, where it was like, oh, Donald Trump, he's just a funny joke, like, whatever, like, but then it became really clear, like, oh, he's actually maybe being taken seriously as this candidate. So, so I started thinking about, like, what did, like, a Mexican-American think at that time when the president was calling them criminals and rapists, or, like, a Muslim-American when Trump did the travel ban on 7 majority Muslim countries, or, like, an American, well, you know, like the list could go on with that, but just kind of this, looking at this prideful image to some, and then this really shameful image to some, but also as this recognizable symbol that kind of like morphs from like glorifying to mocking. Does that make sense? So I made a lot of different versions of these bloated flags. This one's like a recent one. This one I made right after Trump was elected. It's called America Current Mood. And this one, I was at a residency and this woman came and did a studio visit with me, and I don't think she was really into my work to begin with, because she was kind of like, I don't like your gun series, I don't like guns. And I was like, okay, well, like, whatever. But anyway, so I was making a gold flag, and she was like, you need to be careful, because people will think that you're making a Trump flag, because it's gold, he really likes gold, it's the hair. So I was like, all right. So I called it, people will think you're making a Trump flag. And then I made like, people will think you're making a Trump flag, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I made like a twisted one, a giant one. My friend's there's a little baby for scale. And then this piece is called Severed and Growing. So this, do you guys recognize this political cartoon on the left? Yeah. It was Ben Franklin. It was like originally kind of used to let's unify the colonies, and you know, actually I always think of the now that we have Kentucky people in the audience, I was thinking of the Kentucky motto, or on the flag it says, "United we stand, divided we fall." It's kind of the same concept. Like, we got to get together, otherwise we're a broken up snake. So this piece is it's a bloated flag like the other ones I made, but it's cut kind of like how you cut with a knife, and then in the center there's these little almost like tree ring looking things, like growth rings of a tree, and it's like one side is mostly red patchwork, the back side is mostly blue. This is it installed at Snack Melon, so between those columns at Snack Melon. So yeah, kind of like severed and growing, growing together, growing apart. We will find out. So this is something that I did this summer at a residency. These like this squad of eagles. So these like figurines that you'd see maybe on somebody's mantle, but they're bedazzled and painted gold with glitter, and they all have matching nail polish. These are just some other series that there are other like pieces that I'm throwing in. This is some truck nuts. Do you guys know what truck nuts are? They're like, you don't really see them around here, but actually whenever anybody like comes to my studio, I was like, do you know what truck nuts are? And they're always like, oh yeah, I know what truck nuts are. I'm from, and then they literally say like so many different states. I'm like, all right, maybe they're kind of universal. You put it on the back of your truck to be like, I'm really manly, I have big balls, I guess. I don't know. And then I did some of these quilted money quilts. So I was kind of interested in like the gender of money, and like the gender equality in pay and everything, but also when I was thinking about that, I was like, I want to, or I read this New York Times article, it's called "Money is Power and Women Need More of Both." So kind of like looking at a lot of different issues surrounding money and gender, but that I guess I won't go into, but I wanted to make these kind of traditionally feminine quilty looking things, but using money. So here's a more kind of install shots, some bloated flags out in the world. This is at a gallery just down the street. It's called Elijah Beach Showroom. And this was a show, this is called Troll, LOL, LOL, LOL. So it's like, or Troll, LOL, however you want to say it. So this was like a mix of the all caps pieces paired together with the gun. So, and then one of these gold Trump flags in the back kind of saying like, this is kind of the world that we live in under this president. Like he's giving this acceptance and allowance of saying the kind of weird, this weird anger on the internet. Not that it's his fault, whatever. It's in the world now. This was a show that just came down at Lorimoto called She Shed. So I made a She Shed, which is also another. Do you guys know what She Shed is? It's like, do you know what a man cave is? It's kind of like the female equivalent of a man cave. And here's the eagles in action. So the main objective with my work so far has been to kind of create this alternate context for a dialogue on issues that elsewhere would divide us. So therefore reaching this wider audience, which I think soft sculpture and using color and humor and kind of playfulness has this powerful way that you're able to accomplish that. So that is, did I not even, is it, how much time do I have? A lot.
You have 4 minutes.
Oh, okay, 4 minutes. Well, this is where you can find me on the interwebs. And I'll talk a little bit about the film that I chose to play. So, Adam Green's films, anyone seen it?
Yep.
Adam Green's Aladdin? Yeah? Did you work on it, or are you in it or anything?
I'm friends with him, I love it.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I love it too. So, you guys asked me to play, or to choose a film, and I was like, had a hard time. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to choose? I don't know. And then I was like, what have I watched in the last couple of years that was really inspiring and really just wowed me? And I was like, oh yeah, Adam Green's Aladdin. So I don't know why I didn't think of it before. But I feel like his aesthetic is kind of similar to mine. He uses a lot of color, and as you'll see, and a lot of playfulness and humor, and kind of dealing with social commentary stuff, but in this kind of playful way. And yeah, pretty much just when I saw it, I was like, this is an awesome film. The world should see it, and I don't know if a lot of people have, so it's great to bring it here. And also a lot of my friends are in it and worked on it, so that's always fun too. Yeah, that's all. Thank you guys. Do you have any questions on here?